Hey there, everybody. I hope you had a good day today. And today's story is about something that happened 40 days after Jesus had been raised from the dead. That day, what do we call that day? We call it Easter. And this day has a fancy name that I'll tell you about at the end. But this is a story about what happened 40 days after Easter. And of course, as all good stories do, it starts with Jesus. Jesus knew his disciples still needed him. He wanted them to believe in him. And they had to remember the things that he taught them about heaven and about God's kingdom. So Jesus kept appearing to his disciples all the time, like he did with Peter and Mary Magdalene and others that we didn't talk about, like Thomas and two people that were on their way to a town called Emmaus. A lot of other people had seen Jesus. Well, he said to them during that time, "You must remember the things that I've taught you, and I want you to teach them to other people. They need to obey God's rules, and you have to teach people to love each other. Love like they love themselves, that much, and in that kind of a way. Love," said Jesus, "like I love you. Don't forget me in the things that I've taught you. And remember, I'll always be with you." Well, when somebody says don't forget, don't forget, don't forget, sometimes it means, sounds like they're getting ready for something. And what Jesus was getting them ready for, maybe even getting himself ready for, who knows, was this. And here's a picture of what that day started out like. Jesus is standing around like he did often and talking with his disciples and telling them about the kingdom of God and God's love. Well, this time he led them out to a place called Bethany. And they had a lot of questions for him because they still didn't understand everything. Actually, we never do understand everything, but we get more and more close to it sometimes. Well, while they were there and they were asking questions, Jesus told them that they should stay in Jerusalem until they received a very special gift from God. Once you have received this gift, you'll be able to tell everybody about me and about God's love for them in a really wonderful way, he said. And Jesus lifted up his hands and he gave them a blessing. And here's the interesting part. As the disciples watched, Jesus rose up from the earth and went up into a cloud. And then all of a sudden, poof, he was just gone. He went up and disappeared. We use a fancy word for that. Going up we call ascending, and that's why we call this the ascension. He ascended. One minute he's there, the next he's somewhere else. Well, the disciples, they were completely flummoxed by this, and they stood there staring up into the cloud where they had seen him go. And they waited and they waited and they waited for him to appear again. Here's a picture. There they are, staring up into that cloud, like waiting. Have you ever seen a balloon go over? And you stand there watching the balloon go, and watch it fade, and it gets tinier and tinier and tinier? Maybe it was a little bit like that. Well, the disciples were looking up where they had last seen Jesus, and suddenly they heard two men that they didn't even know were there. Two men wearing white standing right next to them who started talking to them. And they said, "Why are you standing looking up at the sky? Jesus has gone into heaven. One day he'll come back the same way." Turned out these were angels. Well, they knew they had to give it time. And they knew that they couldn't spend the rest of their lives standing up, staring into the clouds, because Jesus had told them what they needed to do, which was to go and tell people about God's love and help them understand how to live their lives in ways that are pleasing to God, and to do it themselves. They needed to get on with their lives, but their lives would not be like they were before they met Jesus. They would be very, very different. And that still happens. When people learn about Jesus, they change the way they live often. Like Zacchaeus did, like the fisherman did, like Mary Magdalene did, maybe like you. Different things are important to people who know Jesus than they are to people that don't. But the big thing that matters is always God's love and how we show God's love. Well, the disciples, they understood at that point they were at the start of something, the start of the rest of their lives, not just the end of their time with Jesus. And they realized, wait a minute, he is still with us, and he's always going to be in our hearts. And he told us to wait for a very special gift. So let's go back to Jerusalem, they said, and we'll wait there like he told us. And so that's what they did. They kept an eye open just in case. But they went back to Jerusalem and they waited. And sometimes God tells us to wait for something good and tells us, yeah, I know you're excited. I know you want to get started. I know you want to do something, but wait until the time is right. And if you do that, it'll be even better. And for them, it definitely was. And I have a feeling God's got some good stuff in mind for you too. And it might be tomorrow, or it might be when you grow up. It might even be when you're old. You never know. And that's part of the fun of it all. So, you're going to need some rest. I hope you get a good night's sleep, and we'll pick this up again tomorrow, okay? Good night.